Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming and for hosting me here. I'm very, very glad to be here. I'm going to speak for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so. Please let me know if I'm speaking too fast, if you don't understand me or anything, or if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. Alright, we'll be looking at the vegan future. And this is a change that, of course, we need it, it's necessary, but it's also inevitable. It will happen. And the vegan parties of Europe will help to do that. And I'm, of course, very, very glad to be here with you to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. And, of course, this is a change that's good for everyone, and it's definitely a win-win situation for everybody. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Peter Kalmström. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Swedish blog Sjuηδικού. I'm very lucky because my family is actually all vegan, including my grandmother. She went vegan when she was 99 years old. So it's never too late to go vegan. It can always change, of course. I'm also a writer. I've published hundreds of articles in Swedish newspapers. I'm also a member of a lot of different organizations. Today I'm here representing Djurens Parti, the Swedish Animal Rights Party, but I'm also the chairman of the World Vegan Association, which in Spain, not the whole organization, but in the Spain chapter. So I'm part of a lot of different organizations. I'm also an activist. I often stand on the streets with a sign or trying to talk people into becoming vegan or stop what they're doing to the animals. So the vision here, what I'm going to be talking about today, I was asked to do this speech by the Swedish Animal Rights Party before the last EU election. And we wanted to formulate the positive vision. Most of the time when we're talking about veganism, we're talking about all the bad things. All the bad things that the industry is doing to the animals. All the bad things that the industry is causing with the environment. But we wanted to switch the tables and talk about the positive message. What's going to happen? What can we do? When we get 60% of the votes. That's the vision. That people wake up, democracy actually works. That people realize that this is the right thing to do and they vote for the animal rights parties. So we get 60% of the votes. Our own majority in the EU Parliament. That's the vision. That's the scenario that we're talking about here. We also have another 20% of parties that are sympathetic to our message. They're close to us in some way. And we also have, of course, the others that are never going to change, right? But we have our own majority in Parliament, in the EU Parliament, and all the national parliaments of Europe. So we have the power. Now, what are we going to do with it? And that's, of course, a very important thing for a political party to formulate that. We need to have a vision. And that's why I got involved with the Swedish Animal Rights Party, because they were the only party that really had a positive vision for the future. All the other parties we're going to change a little bit here, a little bit there, and we're slightly better than the other ones. The Animal Rights Parties, they have a full, complete, and positive vision for something better for the future. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So these are the parties that we're mentioning now. I don't think I have your logo on here. I apologize for that, of course.
We are so new, so
you're so new, yes. You should, of course, be on here also. But here you see Djurens Parti up here to the right. This is also another party that's really strong, the Veganerpartiet in Denmark. Animal Welfare Party, Party Analista. You have all these here, of course. You have Hakma here somewhere also, the Swedish one there. Sorry, the Spanish one. The really good ones. So the first thing we need to talk about is this just a fantasy? Is this just imagination?
could you be a little closer to the television?
Should I be closer?
Thank you.
Alright, let's see. I will be closer. I'm sure. Yes. Alright.
Thank you.
Is this just imagination? Is this just a fantasy? Of course, things are not going to go this quickly. We're not just going to vote 60% directly. Is this really a reality? Well, it turns out that 80% of people in Sweden, for example, are against fur farming. Fur farming is still allowed, it's still going on in Sweden. 80% of the Spaniards are against bullfighting. 80% of people in general, wherever you ask, are animal lovers. They call themselves animal lovers. 80%. And about 80% also say that they're concerned about the environment in some way or another, right? 70% of the people say that they want better welfare. 67% of Swedish women are already trying to cut down on meat. They realize meat is not a good thing. Eating animals is not a good thing. They're trying to cut it down. So that's the Swedish women. Of course, the Swedish men are not as good as that, but it's still a huge number. 67% are trying to cut it down. 49% of Americans in a survey, they said they were against slaughterhouses. So I don't think they really thought that through, what that means, that they're against slaughterhouses. Of course, they shouldn't buy any of the products that come out of it then. But 49% are against slaughterhouses. So these are huge numbers, right? Also, 100% of scientists are currently aware that animals are sentient. This is not something that's debated anymore. There are no scientists claiming that humans have sentience, but animals do not. We are the same. Animals have sentience, and yes, human animals have sentience also, of course. Descartes, he argued that animals were robots. But that was 250 years ago, and he was laughed at then. Nobody is proclaiming that animals do not have sentience. All scientists who study the matter agree that they do have sentience. So this is a matter of fact, not a matter of opinion. So that's 100%. So I would argue, once people realize all of these facts, this will happen eventually. Of course, we know how much damage this industry is doing. And I would be happy to go through all of this. You've probably seen this is a graph from Cowspiracy. You've probably seen that movie already. It goes through in excruciating detail how much damage this industry is doing. You've probably seen What the Hell, or this new one. What's the new one?
Game Changer?
Yeah, Game Changers, of course, which goes through all the problems this eating of animals causes inside our bodies, right? So we all know that. So we're not going to talk about that today. We already know that. But the big question we can ask ourselves is, why is this ongoing? Even though we know all those facts, all the bad things, why does it continue all the time? Well, the main thing is, of course, power. This is a system of power where the animals are being abused and are at the bottom. It's also a matter of tradition, of course. We have always done this. Changing traditions is hard. But it's also a matter of money. And we're talking a lot of money. And this is something that surprised me. Turns out that dairy is actually generating more money, more revenue for the firms that make it than seafood and meat put together. So it's a huge industry. Most people say, I just drink milk, I don't eat animals. Well, the dairy industry is actually the biggest one in terms of money. So that's our opposition. We're fighting against a huge industry. Also, of course, there is a demand. There's a huge demand, and it's a rising demand, which is something that we need to worry about, of course, and we need to keep in consideration. We're not fighting against people's opinion, really. We're fighting against a huge demand, a huge industry. We're not fighting against the traditions per se. The big thing we're fighting against is an industry. That's what we need to shut down. But that industry is a house of cards. And you know what happens to houses of cards, right? They fall down, right? That's what they do. And why do they fall down? Well, why does this particular industry fall down? Well, it depends on small margins. And this industry has very low profit margins. That means that they have to sell a lot of meat. If they don't do that, they won't make a profit. They have to have high demand. It's also very resource intensive. You have to have a lot of land, a lot of water, a lot of feed, of course, chicken farm with nothing in their pockets. They take a big loan. They take a big loan for many decades, many years, to pay that back. And then they start that industry. And they start big. And they have to keep going big. Because otherwise, they will not make that profit. So, once something of this changes, once the demand goes down Once the price of feed goes up, once the price of water goes up, and we know that's happening right now, then this house of cards will, of course, fall down. See if we get that video also. Did we get a video of it falling down? No, okay. Well, that house of cards was supposed to fall down, and it will, definitely. If you've ever studied marketing, you know that there is a thing called a cash cow. That is the product that you have in your product portfolio that you're putting all your efforts into. That's the one that's generating a lot of money. That's what meat is today. It's a cash cow in industrial terms. People are making money from that today. But they're not seeing that it's rising. It's a rather stable product. It's not rising. So that means that they're not going to look for meat as the future product. They want stars. That's what they call them. Cash cows or stars. Stars are the ones with a lot of high profit margin and a big growth. And those products are today the non-animal products, the meat alternatives. We see this happening a lot. We see this economical change happening a lot. We see banks refusing to give loans to animal industries. We see industries falling down and going bankrupt, of course. So, let's move on to the vision for the future, the Vision Zero. This is probably the scariest picture I ever show. I usually wear this around my neck, this kind of picture when I'm doing outreach. This is the number of animals that are killed every day, every second for food. Good number to remember is 3,000 land animals every second, or 3 billion land animals every day. 3 billion, sorry, not land animals and sea animals, of course. So 3 billion every day are being killed just for food. So that's the current status. That's what we're fighting against. The 3,000 a second, or the 3 billion a day animals being killed. So, we of course want zero. Our vision, in traffic you usually have a vision, a political vision of zero killed in traffic. That's the Swedish goal that we set. Nobody should be killed in traffic in Sweden. We should have the same kind of political goal for the animal industry, or for the animals in general. We should have zero animals inseminated. That's the most important goal. Sexual use of animals is already outlawed in most countries if the purpose of that sexual use is sexual. If it's economical, then it's allowed. Right? Which makes perfect sense, right? No, of course it doesn't. It's great. What?
Insanity.
Insanity is a very good use. So, zero animals inseminated. That's the first goal. If we can achieve that we do not do that anymore. We do not rape animals. That's the bottom line. We do not sexually use animals. Zero inseminated. Zero animals eaten for food. It's totally unnecessary. It doesn't need to be done. Zero animals fished. Of course, no animals need to be fished. It shouldn't be done. Zero animals hunted or killed in sport of any shape. Zero animals killed in entertainment. Zero animals dying or exposed to animal testing. And zero animals caught to be kept in captivity. But it's also important because now we're talking about politics. We're not talking about morality now. We're talking about politics, and politics is what is possible to do. Right? All of those things that I just mentioned, they're totally possible to do. They're within our technical grasp to do today. However, there are some things that are not technically possible to do today. So we need to be very open and very transparent about what we mean by our zero vision. We do not foresee a future when there's zero animal, or a close future when there's zero animals killed in traffic. Regretfully, as long as we have traffic, there will be animals killed in it. So that is not our political goal. That will take probably many, many decades before we can have zero animals killed in traffic. Also, a political party that proposed that we should defend rabbits from foxes in the wild. That is not a political goal. That's a moral goal for the future maybe, but for our political, we are not defenders. We're defenders of wildlife, definitely, but not from each other. The natural circle of life, we believe that should happen. So that is outside the political goal of our party, of the Swedish party at least. Alright, pets. The pets that we have today, there are a huge number of pets. Those should be kept as pets. They are not capable of living in the wild. So we should not forbid people to have pets. We should not, of course, release all the pets because they will, die horribly. So that's also outside the political goals of dealing with that. Of course, we should stop the insemination. Remember that? Zero insemination, right? So we stop that, and then we stop all the bad things that is happening in the pet industry. And of course, we should minimize the number of new pets that are being generated, so on. So that's another thing. But pets are still in captivity. I would love to release my own pet if I could, but there is no such space that I can do that today. So that's outside of the political vision. Also, asylums. Animals in asylums or refugees are in captivity. We are not proposing to forbid those, to close those places. They should still be allowed to keep the animals in captivity for their own protection. They should not be eaten, they should not be inseminated and all that, but they should be allowed to be kept in captivity. Also, if you're being attacked by a mosquito, that is self-defense. You are allowed to defend yourself against attacks by animals. That's a totally different thing. But we often get these attacks. This whole speech is about what's going to happen when the whole world goes vegan. It's kind of like reductio in absurdum. You try to reduce the argument into an absurd, but we're trying to answer that scenario here. So yes, we are allowed to defend ourselves against attacks. That is not the political goal, to protect the mosquitoes from humans and so on. We do not fight for bacterial rights. We're talking about animals, not bacteria, not mushrooms or other half-animal kind of beings either. So we're talking about animals. It's very, very clear. It's important for us to be clear on these issues, because otherwise we'll get into very, very strange discussions if we're not clear on these issues. Alright, the next step is how fast is this going to go? Some things are going to happen in months, other things are going to happen in years. So let's start with the things that can happen right away. Because of course, now we have the power. We want to show, the first 100 days, we want to show that now we can make changes really, really fast. And we can actually make things happen in months. Which other party can say that? Which other movement can say that we can change the world in months? We can. And we have the science behind this. So let's look at the clarity. That's the first thing we can do. And that's what I'm trying to do right here. I'm trying to be clear and open about what's going to happen. And that's what we need to do as a movement. People are going to be are they going to take my pet away? Well, we just answered that. No, we're not going to take your pet away. So on. We need to be very clear about these things. Right. First thing we can do right away is implement the marketing laws that are already in existence. You're not allowed to lie in marketing. Those laws exist in Greece, they exist in Sweden, they exist in the EU, they exist in the whole world. Just implement them. Make sure that they're actually used. The people that say that this animal died happy, they have to prove that. Because that is, in 100% of the cases, it's a lie. Right? So they're lying. So that advertising should not be allowed. Funding. Of course, we can help to fund a lot of these things, of course. We can also start negotiating with the industry. It's tempting from a moral perspective, we should punish all of the ones that have done all these horrible things to the animals. But as a political party, that's not what we're about. We're not about punishment, we're about real change. So we should start negotiating. How can you phase out all of your products? What can we do to help you survive as a business without killing more animals? Right. We can also change the practices. We're going to get back to that. All the laws, as we talked about, for example, the marketing laws, they are already there. We're going to change how those laws are implemented, the practice, how they're being used. So those are the things that can go quick, that can happen. Laws are tricky things. They take usually a long time to implement. So changing the laws will take years. Trade negotiations, trade agreements between EU and the US and so on, those take years to do. Negotiating with the industry, of course, we mentioned that. And when we're negotiating with the industry, we need to start talking about breeding.
because that's the first goal there, stop the breeding. And so we need to make sure that that happens on day one. No more chickens, no more pigs, no more cows, etc., no more breeding. We need to start the conversion. All of these businesses, they're good at something, and switch it over to something that doesn't hurt animals. Investments, of course, we need to talk about how we're going to invest in new businesses that will take over this industry. Take over the jobs, take over the food that they are providing, and make better food, of course. Subsidies is a very important thing. Currently, the European Union is giving, under something called the Common Agricultural Policy, they're giving somewhere around 40 billion euros every year to the animal industry. Of course, it's not that simple, because they're giving it to a lot of different systems and a lot of different ways. So this number, the 40 billion euros, is a calculation based on how much they're giving, and how much is actually animal products. I'll share all these slides later, and the sources for them also. So this is something, this whole PAC, the Common Agricultural Policy, is negotiated once every 7 years. I want to show you one example here. Sorry about the small print there. There's actually things that are happening right now that's very, very current in this area also. That's buyouts, and that's something that we can do. This happened in Netherlands just a few months ago, where Netherlands realized that this pig farming is causing a huge list of different problems in the environment. The Netherlands is a very small country, and they have a lot of pigs there, about 12 million pigs in that small country. So that's causing a lot of problems. So they decided, we're going to buy out. We're going to simply pay for buying the farms. And about 500 farmers have already agreed to that they're going to sell their farm and stop producing pigs there. So that's something. And also California, there's a big drive there also. They're going to spend $100 billion dollars for buying out farms there also. The big goal there is to get rid of the feedlots. So that's something that's going on right now. So benefits, of course, is something that farmers get a lot. We talked about subsidies before. There are also lots of benefits. For example, they get cheaper gas. And they don't have to pay all the taxes that regular people and regular businesses pay. They get subsidized or discounted taxes. So that's, of course, something that needs to be taken away. We need to find lots of different plant-based alternatives. We talked about that already. And in California, this is called state aid, and it's called the Booker's Bill. All right. Taxes is another thing that we can change rather quickly. For example, the VAT. Right now, VAT on food is rather the same on all foods. Of course, we can change that, and every country can do that by themselves also. What VAT should I have on vegetables? What should I have on meat? As long as you do it across the board, you're not allowed, as a country, today, if I say I don't want to, for example, in Sweden we talk a lot about how bad the Danish pigs are. Swedish pigs are wonderful, of course, they die happily, but the Danish pigs, they're torture. That's the message. You've all heard that, I'm sure. It's a similar thing here. You probably blame somebody else, right? Who are the Cypriots or something, right? Anyhow, I don't know. Anyhow, every country does that. They blame somewhere else, it's horrible. Here in Greece, here in Sweden, it's all wonderful. So, if we wanted to put a tax on Danish pigs, we could not do that in Sweden, because that is considered a trade barrier, and we're not allowed to do that. But if we put it across the board, all meat is extra taxed. All vegetables are taxed lower. That's possible to do, and it's really quick to do. Transports is, of course, one thing that we can also put a lot of tariffs on. Water, is also something, of course, that's being used a lot for the animal industry. And as soon as people talk about drought, talk about saving water, fresh water it takes to produce 1 kilo of beef. We should be there stating those facts. Those are not opinions, those are facts. Of course, well permits. People have to apply for getting a new well. We should talk about that. What are you going to use it for? We're going to produce animals. Well, then it's not allowed anymore. Road permits, of course, they need to transport all of these things. Oops. Yeah, sorry, PowerPoint just crashed. That was not part of the show. Alright, sorry about that. Alright, so where were we? What were we talking about? Anybody remember? Nobody remembers. Water, yes, we were talking about water, thank you. Road permits, we were talking about road permits, thank you. There we were. So of course, everything needs to be transported. So we need to stop that, of course. We need to stop those permits, those exceptions that they already have. So let's talk about the existing laws that we can use. Of course, every country has their own welfare laws, right? And there's also EU animal welfare laws. Every country claims that we have the best welfare system in the world, right? For animals. Sweden does certainly, I'm sure Greece does also. It doesn't happen here. It happens abroad, but not here. Alright, so of course we talked about the marketing laws and also, of course, the environmental laws. We can use those. Those already exist. We don't have to implement new laws, we can use the existing ones. So, the Council of Europe Convention, that was signed in 1976, has these words. We cannot expose animals to something that's unnecessary suffering or injury. That's all we need. Right? Unnecessary suffering or injury. Right? It's unnecessary. And it's definitely injury. They're dying. They're suffering every day. So that's all we need. We don't need any new animal welfare laws. We don't need any new... It's unnecessary to keep them in captivity. That's it. That's all we need. Marketing laws, of course, the marketing laws are all saying you're not allowed to lie. Well, they are lying. You do not look like Superman if you eat meat. Of course. You do not get strong bones if you drink cow's milk. Of course. This is known facts. You're not allowed to lie, as we talked about. Those chickens are not happy. Chicken meat is not lean and clean, and so on. You're not allowed to market food to children, or anything to children, really. Marketing to children is outlawed in the EU. Still, they're doing it. They're producing a lot of different marketing materials directed to children. And of course, our environmental laws are intended to protect our future. That's what they're for, right? We know that about 23% of the fresh water on the planet is being used for animals today. We know that 14.5% at least of the greenhouse gas emissions are due to the animal industry. It might be much higher, but it's at least that. Let's agree on that. We know that about 71% of the farmland on the planet is used to produce animal products, to feed or grazing. And we know that about 45% of the actual surface of the planet, not just the farmland, is used to produce meat. That's a lot. We're wasting a lot of land here, right? So let's get back to the practices of how the law is implemented. We know all of those laws we can use against this industry and for the animals and for ourselves and for the future. The permissions that they have to get for everything they do, to put up a new barn, to do everything. We can change how those things are being done. The inspections. Every country has their own inspectors that go out and check the farms. In Sweden, they call ahead and say, I'm coming Wednesday, is that okay for you? That's not a good inspection. Surprise inspection. That's a very, very easy thing to change. You just need to employ more people and go out every day if necessary, right? You'll find ingressions, you'll find a lot of things. Cameras. A lot of countries are talking about putting cameras in the slaughterhouses, cameras in the farms. That will, of course, expose a lot of crimes also. And then, of course, all those crimes, they should be persecuted. In Sweden, 91% of the hunting crimes are not persecuted. They don't even go to trial, 91%. The police has found a crime, they know who did it, they send it to the prosecutor, he dismisses it. In 91% of the cases. That should not be the case, of course. They should be persecuted. The people that go into a farm and film stuff, they are persecuted today. I have lots of friends who have spent time in prison for doing exactly that. They should not be sent to prison. They should be rewarded. There should be TV shows about them. They're heroes, right? They should be rewarded. The international treaties is a problem that we need to deal with, of course. There are lots of these different programs, and they say that you're not allowed to put barriers between countries. And that's something that we need to be very much aware of as a political party and as a political movement. That if this change only happens in Europe, then we're going to have a lot of problems with these international treaties. Of course, we hope that this vegan change happens all over the world really quickly, and I'm thinking it will, but this is something that we need to be aware of, that this world is controlled very much by treaties that we have very little control over as political parties in one country. They need to be dealt with globally. Of course, the whole goal here is to improve the environment for animals and humans. This is the amount of agricultural area that's being used in Europe at the moment. As you see, it's spiking, it's going up and up and up and up. Same thing with fertilizer usage. We're increasing that a lot over the years. The wildlife in the world has decreased by about 60% since 1970. It's decreasing really, really fast. This is the way that forests look in Europe today. You see, this looks rather green, looks rather nice, doesn't it? And in fact, if you count the number of trees in Europe, people will claim that, yes, today we have more trees in Europe than we did like 45, 50 years ago. And that's true, but they're not natural forests. They're not real forests. These are planted forests that are cut down every 30, 40 years. And that does not at all the same thing. It does not give the same amount of biodiversity. It does not give the same carbon binding or any of the other things that a wild forest actually does. So natural forest is very, very important. Wild animals, of course, we need much more of these. We need biodiversity for survival of the species on the planet. So that's something that we as a political movement should also be talking about, that nobody else is talking about. Some scientists are talking about it, but there's no movement that's talking about these things. And that's rewilding. There's a lot of projects going on about rewilding. And planting trees, that's something that a few people are actually talking about. A lot of things are being done there. Actually, Trump went into that also. I think that's the only environmentally friendly thing that Trump has talked about. He talked about planting 1 trillion trees. He doesn't know, he doesn't put any details into that, and where is he going to plant those trees and what's he going to do with it. But that's an important thing. Planting more trees and letting them stand. Don't cut them down, right? We also often get the question about wild animals. Isn't it, good that we hunt and kill these things? No, it's not. Of course it's not. And that's something that we need to stop also as a political movement. We need to be very firm against that also. And one of the reasons that is wrong, besides the moral, of course, that this is a victim that you're killing there, is this thing, mammal carrions. When an animal dies in the forest, that is a horrible thing for that individual, of course, and its family, but it's a really good thing for the whole circle of life, because there is a whole bunch of different animals that eat animal carrion, that eat dead animals. They need to. Lots of bacteria and insects and birds, they need to eat dead animals. We humans do not need that. Of course we do not. But all the other animals do. So when a hunter goes out, kills an animal and carries it out into the woods, probably not. He probably uses a car to do that. But anyhow, he's causing a lot of damage to this circle of life. So we need more animals. And we often talk about grazing animals. They're very important. Yes, of course they are. But there are lots of different animals that can graze. Not only cows that are used in milk production. That's a big thing in Sweden. We need to save our open landscapes. That's what we talk about in Sweden a lot. So we need cows for that. No, we do not need cows in captivity for that. We could have taurus, we could have bisons, we can have, well, they're not grazing, but of course we need beavers, we need wild horses, we need wolves, lots of wild animals. And this is already happening also all over the world, that the people are implementing things. Rewilding Europe is a fabulous website. If you want to get in a good mood one day, you've had all the bad news that you can take for that day, go to rewildingeurope.com. It's a really good website where they have a lot of projects where they're trying to rewild Europe. Another thing that's going on, and that we should also be talking about as a movement, is permaculture. Permaculture is, of course, culture that is not as degenerative, not as exploitative as general farming. As the word suggests, it's permanent culture. You grow things and you don't turn the earth around every year and stuff like that. And it's also very good for the climate, it's good for water, it's good for the animals, of course. All of these changes that we're going to implement once we have the power is, of course, really good for health also. And doctors should already, and of course can, with our help, prescribe actual fruits and veggies instead of medicines, because that is actually often very, very effective. And this will save a lot of health care costs, of course. That's something that every country in the world is talking about. How are we going to save on healthcare? Well, this is going to save on healthcare. If people eat healthier, people eat less animals, less fat and all those things, then that's going to help. So, all that money now, we've saved 40 billion euros eventually, right, from that cap. We're going to use that money wisely also, of course. We're going to save a lot of money, so we have the financing. Every political party gets that question. You want to do some things? Yes. How are you going to finance those things? We have the financing ready. Take it away from the animal industries. They are not using it for anything good. So we take that money, and of course, we find a lot of good uses for it. For example, we produce things without abuse. Food, of course, there are lots of things we can eat that do not involve abuse of animals. Leather, of course, is another product. There are lots of different alternatives that are being produced now, made from all kinds of things. Mulch, of course, better soil is a good thing. How are you going to do pollination? When we're talking about animal exploitation in general, one of the animals that is really heavily being exploited is bees and bumblebees also, of course. They're being used, and they're being kept in captivity and traveling around to pollinate. So that's something we need to research. How can we do that? Because as now, we get about 70% of the types of food that we eat are pollinated by animals in captivity. Not 70% of the calories, that's an important distinction. Because most of the food that we actually get our calories from is not pollinated. But, of course, we want to continue eating nice fruits and stuff, and those today are also being fruits of pollination. So we need to look at alternatives there. Today, there isn't really an alternative, so we need to research that. We need to invest in better things to do that. We need to research rewilding, we talked about that already. And of course, we need to research how to do animal liberation. Because that's what it boils down to. We need to liberate all of these animals. So, the big question is here, what's going to happen to all of the farm animals? And again, we're talking about a rather science fiction scenario here, where everybody goes vegan more or less overnight. And of course, that is a bit of an absurd, that's not how it's going to happen. But let's face that question head on and try to solve it. What's going to happen if everybody in Europe goes vegan one day to another? Alright, can we solve that? And the answer is yes, we can. The problem here is the numbers. We have huge numbers. In Europe, the number of land animals in captivity is about 7 billion animals in total. So 7 billion. That comes out to 14 animals per person living in the EU today. So, well, can you take care of 14 animals? Yeah, you probably could. It would be hard work, right? It would be hard work, definitely. But if I got paid for it, it would be a rather nice job to do, right? So it's not impossible to do it. Of course, we have huge problems with these, because one of the problems is, of course, the lifespan. The vast number, if we go back here, we see the big number here is, of course, chicken, poultry, hens. They will only live for less than a year. So most of that, so each person will have maybe 13 chickens and hens. They will die after a year. That will be a huge tragedy for everybody to deal with. But that is not something we should shy away from. We need to take care of these animals as best we can. Because that's the moral obligation we have. And of course, we will make our effort to strategically help people to do this as well as possible. So the lifespan, of course, some of the animals will live for 20, 25 years. They don't get to do that in the industry, of course, but some of them will actually be able to do that, even though they're released. So, for example, cows, they can be released rather freely. They will manage rather well. How are we going to provide employment? Well, 14 animals for every human being. That's a good job. Lots of people want to work with animals. So let's take away all the bad jobs and provide good jobs instead. Taking care of all these animals. Those are really good jobs. Liberation, of course, we need to take care of that. Some animals can be liberated, some cannot. Some needs to be taken care of. There's a lot of that needs to happen. One huge problem that we also need to think about is the fish. The fish cannot be released because most of the fish that we have in captivity today, and that's many more billions than we're talking about here, those are predators. There's salmon, for example. If we release billions of salmon into the oceans, that will create huge problems. So that is something we don't really have a solution for today. I haven't heard any solution for what are we going to do if this happens overnight, which of course it won't, but anyhow, it's interesting to discuss. We cannot get into the 13th Amendment. Anybody knows what this is, the 13th Amendment of the United States?
No.
It's a movie, it's a documentary about what happened after the war in the US when they released all the slaves. They decided to release all the slaves, right? Did that happen overnight? No, it did not. It took almost 20 years for them to decide how to release the slaves. One of the things they did was say that you're not allowed to vote if you've ever gone to prison. That was the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. So that meant, because of course they didn't want all the blacks that were released to be able to vote. So that is an example of a scenario we do not want to end up in. We need to stop the madness right away. We cannot wait for 20 years while we figure out how we're going to solve all the problems that the madness has created. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Let's not do this again. Yeah. So also another thing that we need to think about is this 71% of the agricultural land. What are we going to do with all that land? Well, we're of course not going to use it to produce feed. And that's what we're doing now. Most of that is monocultures. Monocultures, we all know, those are bad. That's the opposite of biodiversity. That's what happens. It, of course, uses a lot of resources. It needs transporting, it needs drying. And of course, the prime example of this is soy, which is being used in huge quantities. And you know probably that 90% of the soy that's being used in the world is being used for animal feed. Same thing goes for palm oil. It's the same thing there. We need to stop that, of course. Palm oil and soil are excellent products. They are very efficient in terms of energy use, and they're also good for eating. They're good tasting products, right? We should not waste that wonderful product by giving it to animals and then eating the animals. It's crazy. Of course, grazing also uses a lot of land, and that produces huge problems with overgrazing all over the world. Another issue that we need to address very, very clearly is the question of fertilizer. Well, fertilizer is often represented by the animal agriculture as a resource, something good. We need to have fertilizer, otherwise we cannot grow all the beautiful vegetables and fruits that we need. Well, let's look at this problem. We're talking about shit here, right? That's what we're talking about, straight out. So we have 7 billion animals in the industry today in the EU. They produce way too much fertilizer. Fertilizer is not a problem. There are lots of different alternatives to fertilizer in the form of shit, of course. There's the permaculture, which uses much, much less fertilizer. As we talked about, that's something we need to promote and help with, of course. There's chemical fertilizer, which of course has its problems also. There's also lots of different alternatives to composting. Composting is really, really powerful, and if you do that with vegetable products, it becomes really, really good earth, very rich soil. Permaculture, we didn't mention that, but of course, this is something we need to research also. So we need to be clear about what we know, what we can do right away, and what we need to research. But let's not wait let's move ahead with these things right away. Of course, releasing the predators is something that is difficult to do. In Sweden, the minks is a huge problem because we have about 1 million minks, and these are really cute animals, but they're also, sorry, there we go, that's the minks. The minks, there's the video playing of the mink. This is a very cute animal, but it's also a predator. So if we release 1 million of those, that will create a problem. We talked about the salmon, same thing there, they're also predators. So releasing them is not something that we can easily do. That's something that needs to be researched. Also, of course, we have lots of exotic animals that cannot survive in, well, in Sweden especially here, most animals can survive in Greece, but maybe.
No canaries.
No canaries, no, right. Actually in Spain where I live, they've been releasing lots of canary birds there, and now they're hunting those because they produce too much trouble. So yeah, of course we're against killing all animals, and we should not. Well, so we should think about how we're going to release the animals that are currently in zoos, etc. Dolphins, of course, is another type of animal that we have in captivity that we need to release. Giraffes also, of course. Alright, imports. Let's talk about imports and exports, because this is a question that we'll get. What's this going to do to the economy? Once we stop this animal industry, what's that going to do? Well, in fact, we're importing about 138 billion, and it's different types of food. It's processed foods, animal products, and vegetables. And as you see, it's only 20% that's vegetables. So 138 billion is the total number of that. And as we've talked about the soy, we're importing, a lot of what we're importing is soy feed. That's what we're importing. We're also importing lots of palm oil. When we look at the export, because of course if we're talking about how this is going to change the economy, we're talking about the trade balance. Are we going to have to import more food into the EU if the EU does this change? Well, in fact, it's about the same. We're exporting about the same. So if we just stop doing this, then it will not change the trade balance in the EU. Of course, a lot of businesses will have to change their business model, but it will not change the overall trade balance. It's about 137 billion of exports. So, let's talk about new jobs. That's something that every political party must have a message around, right? Because everybody wants jobs. Well, one of the things that we are talking about that nobody else is talking about, we're quite unique in lots of these things, but one of them is rewilding. We need to rewild a lot of it. We know that Europe used to be covered by jungles. Not so long ago, right? 5,000–7,000 years ago, this whole continent used to be covered by forests. These beautiful rocks and mountains that you have here in Greece, they used to be covered by forest also. Same thing in Sweden, right?
But why rewilding? I cannot understand the argument of the rewilding.
The argument is, first of all, more wild animals, more biodiversity. So we need, and they need somewhere to live. Habitat is the crucial word here, right? So they need somewhere to live, therefore we need to make more jungles to them. It's a bad thing when they cut down the jungles or the rainforest in South America. It was a bad thing when we did it 5 to 7 years ago. 7,000 years ago, of course. It was a bad thing. We need to start rebuilding that. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to require a lot of jobs. And these are good jobs, right? That's an important thing. Transplantation. That's something we need to do. Get more wild animals in there. That's something we need. For the biodiversity, that's a good thing. Also, for carbon binding. The only thing that we know, you remember that Keeling curve? I haven't talked about that scary thing. The Keeling curve is showing how much carbon dioxide is in the air right now. It's going up and up and up, right? So we're about 416 now. Normal level is somewhere around 280 at the most. So we're way high. The only way to get that down is planting trees, rewilding. So those are two big reasons. Biodiversity, carbon binding. So transplanting new animals in there. Definitely, we need to do that. Take care of the existing animals, of course, research, we mentioned that. Restore the lungs of the planet. That's something that's really important. Another thing that we have really destroyed all over Europe is the mines. The mountains. We have mined the mountains and destroyed, there's a lot of destroyed areas of mountains. We need to rebuild that in many different ways. Industrial grounds. There's a lot of places in Europe now We don't have that much industry left in Europe anymore. We've outsourced that to China now. That's why they're polluting so much now. So all those industrial grounds that we have in Europe, we need to clean them up. Clean up our mess. That's also very, very good jobs. Also landfills. Landfills lying there. We've been doing landfills for more than 100 years. There's actually more than 500,000 landfills. And here you see the areas where there's still putting garbage into the ground. Greece is one of those countries where that is still happening. So of course we need to stop that, and that's something that we need to be very, very clear about. And I don't think any other party is talking about that either, right? Stop putting garbage in the ground. Let's start cleaning it up. That's a good job. It's blue collar, hard work, but it's really important work, and it's actually building up the planet. Urban farming is another type of job that we want to help to create. It's also really important jobs and really fruitful ones. So, in conclusion, I'm coming to the end now. A vegan future is a win-win situation. It involves a lot of changes, naturally. It will save a lot of lives, both of humans and of animals. It will actually improve the economy. It will decrease emissions. We know we need to do that. We've promised to do that in 2015. We promised in the Paris Agreement, right? We need to build a better future where we stop wasting resources so much. We need to improve our health. We know that already. We need to improve the environment. We need to create important jobs. So that's the conclusion. If you want to see a bit more about this, there's a really good movie. It's a bit hard to find, but it's called Carnage. It's the only vegan comedy that exists. It's a few years old now, but if you search it, I'm sure you can find it. It's a really good movie. But this was the vision from the Swedish Djurens Parti, and I'm looking forward to creating that future together with you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.